All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome to our CX Explorers podcast, episode 2. Today, Jasper and I are gonna be talking about obviously some of the big moves in the world of Formula One this week, in the last couple of weeks, but more importantly, also the use cases for generative AI in terms of predicting customer behavior and really creating personalized and tailored customer experiences. Obviously, us, being in this space, Jasper, I think it's moving very quickly in how generative AI is really being used to really target people. And if you even look on your Instagram or any of your reels, right, a lot more and more of this technology is coming out. And I think what our predictions were earlier on was we're going to see thousands of different AI and GPT type companies coming out, and eventually it's going to come full circle and kind of consolidate into a truer solution, I would say. Because right now, like we always mention, AI is a field of study, and too often or not, we tend to use that as an industry as just kind of the filler word, because we don't really know what the use case might be, right? And I think that's where, when we look at Apple Vision Pro and their spatial computing, they're very specific about the verbiage that they're using for a lot of their quote unquote AI product lines, right? So I think that's really important for a lot of industries to follow suit, is really understand what are we using machine learning and the study of AI for, and what can we call those specific use cases, because it's really starting to muddy the waters, I think, causing a lot of artificial unintelligence and more of those AI hallucinations that me and you are not a big fan of.
Definitely, man. Couldn't agree more.
So I obviously, for those of you that don't really follow Drive to Survive or the Formula One sport, some big news that you'll probably have heard from anyone that you do know that is a fan. Lewis Hamilton, 12 years with Mercedes AMG Petronas F1, is finally making the jump to Ferrari's Scuderia. I think it's a really cool move. I think Mercedes hasn't really been, keeping their end of the deal for Lewis to drive what needs to happen, and I think honestly the fans are kind of getting a bit sick and tired of it too, and they all, from what I've seen, they seem to support this move. What are your thoughts, Jasper, on this move?
I mean, yeah. To your point, man, there's a lot of angles that you can look into it, right? You have there your drama angle, you have there your dreams angle. Well, Lewis is just checking tech boxes, before putting his or taking off his hat. But for me personally, I'm quite interested, to check and see what Ferrari's going to be up to in the next few years as they get Lewis on board. I mean, Fred Vasseur, I know he had some discussion with Lewis, right? So I want to know, and I'm keen to seeing what they promised, right, in terms of the power unit, the technology that they're going to be implementing. Because if you're a driver, you're not just going to be like joining a team, signing up for them just because. Right. So yeah, I'm excited to see, the Tifosi fans going up into the podiums again, number ones. So yeah, I think every one of us secretly is a Ferrari fan. If you say that you're Mercedes, Red Bull, I mean, secretly there's like 25% chance that you're also a Ferrari fan, right?
Well, it's funny. Me and my friend have a joke that we always say: the F in F1 truly stands for Ferrari. Right, it's their game, and everyone else is just invited to their house to play. Right, let's be real. That's really how the sport is.
For sure, man, for sure.
I think another big piece was also just with some of the changes at Red Bull, with Adrian Newey, some talks about him potentially leaving as well, and he's their key technical guy, and I don't think he was a fan of their more conservative approach to entering the 2024 season. So I think, needless to say, Jasper, it's going to be an interesting drive to survive in the next couple of seasons that we see coming up for sure.
Definitely.
And part of what I think is even making that even more interesting is if you look at the fan base for even Mercedes. I think a Drive to Survive and a lot of that fan base, is really a fan base of Lewis Hamilton, right? Because let's be real, no one's buying a George Russell hat and spending $80 on that every week. So I think as we kind of look at that fan base and what that could potentially mean for Ferrari's fan base and growth, is kind of touching on the topic that we wanted to talk about today, is how does generative AI, how can it be used to predict customer behavior to really tailor and provide a more personalized customer experience?
For sure. Yeah. And just kind of quick segue there. I think generative AI and predictive analytics was doing its work to me because when I was researching articles about Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton, then I get all these ads, wanting me to buy Ferrari merch and all of that. I mean, you just kind of have that in the back of your mind. Maybe I need to buy this right now, and that kind of drives the value of predictive analytics and personalized recommendation too, right?
For sure. And I think even some of the ads, as they get more customized to take in your information as to, what your profile looks like from a marketer's view, and being able to personalize and generate AI images that, are really specific to yourself, right? And I think, with generative AI, the ability to analyze your past interactions with the company or with a certain brand, understand those behaviors to personalize recommendations and even content that you're looking at can really drive you on that buyer's journey and really help companies understand individual preferences and behaviors and how companies even market to them. Right. And this is really where I think business is not just when the world of motorsport can really tailor some of those offerings, whether it's in the B2B world, whether it's in the B2C world, to really meet those needs more accurately and in a much quicker manner as well.
For sure, for sure.
What do you see as kind of the initial pitfalls with using generative AI for personalized, selling and customer experiences?
So right now, if I'm being honest, man, okay, I'm going to a little bit on a tech nerd here, right? I've been an Apple user for quite some time before I was a Google user. So one of the things that really irritated me with the use of generative AI and predictive analytics was this hardcore targeting of ads. I hated that. Even if I just search for something that doesn't is not really relevant to a product that I'm going to be looking for, then the next thing I know, all of my news page, all of my news feed, they have all of this specific product that was actually tied towards the one that I recently searched, right? So that actually irritates me because it's actually bombarding with a lot of things that I don't even need, right? So when I switched, from using Google to Apple, and Apple, we all know that Mark Zuckerberg hates Apple, right? Because of the option for you to kind of don't track my footprint, right? Like just don't look at my personal history.
Ask app not to track.
Yeah, exactly. Ask app not to track. So that one, man, I know that it's not only going to be me who has the same sentiment, right? But that's definitely one of the pitfalls that I'm actually seeing with predictive models with targeted ads, targeted campaigns specific towards the last thing that you've searched, because you don't necessarily need, right, that specific product. You just have like a thought in your brain that you want to search for this specific topic, but then again, predictive analytics and predictive AI is throwing a lot of things in front of you just for you to be able to get into that zone even deeper. So that's one of the things, Daniel. Not sure if have any thoughts or comments around that, or what's your view for that?
I would totally agree. Even searching queries for work purposes, right? And then you start getting advertisements for these things can really just, I think, make a lot of noise and frustration that, okay, this is getting a bit too much. And I think that's really what's been happening with ChatGPT kind of being brought to the masses for free. It just really accelerated it at a rate that no one was ready for. And I think what we're seeing a lot, especially in our space, is a lot of infosec, a lot of governance, a lot of ethical questions really being brought to light, and really looking at what's the governance model for this field of study and its use cases, and how do we ensure people are protected, and more importantly, that people are held accountable for when it doesn't go right, right, or when it does violate certain policies based on some of the case studies that we've talked about before.
For sure, yeah.
So with generative AI, kind of this personalization recommendation, a lot of kind of what we've seen in terms of what also frustrates and irritates us is maybe a lack of, accurate predictive analytics, right? While these generative AI models can forecast, potential behaviors based on historical data, it also can't, right? As we've seen with some of the ads that we've gotten. And again, when you factor in like purchasing patterns or like customer churn and retention and the potential of like success of new products and services, if you can get this right, you can really identify and anticipate behaviors, and you can really make better informed decisions to drive customer retention and drive growth. But I think the big question here is, how do we start to get it more right? Like, I know with Apple, they're doing ask app not to track, so it becomes really what we kind of deem as qualified data at this point in terms of what people are allowing it to track, right? And I've started to see this in the customer experience models for some of the programs that we support as well, where it's really making sure we get the buy-in at every step from the customer, so we can really understand how do we market and what channels do they approve us talking to them in, right? And I know this has a bit of a tie into your area of expertise, which is really in sentiment analysis. So do you think in your experience, sentiment analysis and tools like that under the artificial intelligence kind of field can be applied to get better predictive analytics and understanding customer behaviors?
Oh, most definitely, man. Right? Because we all know, right? I think I've mentioned this during a previous episode. Right now, it's a data race, right? So the very important thing when you train LLMs or any AI models in that regards is data collection, right? So we need to be able to have or embrace the fact that we need to feed AI systems all the data that we can, whether it's supervised or unsupervised data. Whether it's sentiment data, customers previous historical purchases, and even customer churn, right? All of those, if you put that into the LLM, as long as you have the buy-in of everyone within the organization for you to ingest all the supervised or unsupervised data that you have, it can definitely be better and be more accurate, because it's going to be an iterative process. And I think we also talked about that during our last episode, right? Where it takes anywhere, even for the work that we do, right, for speech analytics, it takes anywhere between 2 to 6 months for you to be able to train a model. It's not because you buy an AI model and then they give you a truck, right, and you just drive it, right? It's not going to be that. It's going to be a very tedious process. It's going to be more of a marathon and not a sprint when it comes to training data and to make your AI models more accurate when it comes to predicting.
And what's to prevent or protect, let's say, company A who's spent countless resources and hours training their LLM and tailoring it for their customers and their experiences and their kind of predictive analytic requirements, to go and sell that kind of data to company B to leverage kind of the same insights and glean those same insights from it?
That's a hard question, Dan, because just recently, with Contact Point 360, I think that there was also another organization who reached out to me, and they're essentially putting together a marketplace, right, for you to be able to buy data, right? So there's essentially that gap right now within the AI space where everyone doesn't have access to the data that they want to be able to train their model, right? So I think that's one of the things that I'm actually honestly excited to see what's going to happen within that space. Because if you're going to ask me, like, how are you going to get this? Right now, there's no clear answer to that, because with the experience that I've heard over the past few weeks with companies reaching out to us, there's essentially a marketplace that's being put together for one to buy specific data, may it be for healthcare, may it be for tech support or whatnot, just for you to grab that and be able to train your LLM on.
Because I've been approached similarly by not other companies, but even institutions. I think there was one in Sweden where I was talking with, and they were really looking at as a similar use case was we want to build an LLM that can serve customer service models and really be kind of the chat GPT for that industry. And again, I think everyone that she was talking to ran into a very similar problem was we can avail some of that data to you, but we can't avail all of it. And because it's not our data and there's some PII, there's obviously HIPAA, GDPR, there's a lot of regulations that govern this data and protect us. And for me, I'm not going to spend the next, 24 days trying to figure out how to violate every one of these regulations to get you that data so you can build a large language model. While I see the use case for it and it can be very powerful, I empathize with her in the sense that it's going to be an uphill battle to get the granular level of data and the complete set of data that's needed to build this right? Because if you're only working with 30% of what a company is willing to share with you because they are not able to, divulge all their data, you might as well not do it, right? Because that accuracy and the use case for it is not going to be highly functional or be able to glean any insightful behaviors or sentiments out of that.
Exactly, exactly. And that's also, I think connected to what we were talking about earlier, where some of this predictive analytics model is not accurate, and simply because it doesn't have enough data to be trained on, right? And again, that's one of the limitations, I think, right now. If you're someone who's actually out there trying to create your own LLM models, you're going to be stuck with that road bump where you need specific data for that specific niche, and you won't have easy access to it.
So it almost seems like we need to better segment the customer population first into kind of their own data sets, right? In terms of channels that people are willing to accept to be marketed to, and to also kind of do a control group to understand, are these ads even relevant for this segmentation, right? And I think segmentation is critical because I don't want to get Instagram ads about stuff I searched at for work purposes earlier on in the day when I'm scrolling through, my feed in bed at night, right? And I think better segmentation and really understanding, from your customer base, who's willing to be marketed this way, are these ads relevant, and really looking at that data more granularly now can really be tied into how we effectively use predictive analytics in generative AI models to forecast customer behavior and potential buying behaviors as well, right? And I think only then will we ever get to a point where you can then start to really enhance that customer interaction, put in sentiment analysis, and then really understand, how we can create content that's going to be more specific to those buyers and what they're looking for.
And you know what, Dan? Just popped in my head. I think I know we were talking about Apple Ask app not to track. I think they're way ahead of us. Still, again, right? It always is. They're always like years ahead of the competition, and they already have that data, Dan. Right? They have every individual iPhone data where users are putting Ask app not to track. So that's already a data set, right? They're gonna be able to create a model where they can segment customers. Like, okay, this iPhone user is X years old, and he or she, asked up not to track for this specific app. So they're essentially going to be able to create models around that, right? And that, yeah,
And I mean, we've just started scratching the surface with the release of Vision Pro finally. I'm glad to see that it's selling as many units as it is with
yeah,
this ridiculous price point. It was interesting though. I was reading an article and someone was saying or suggested the idea that the Vision Pro was designed to be a fail, right? Not in the sense of its technology, but in terms of its marketability, right? That for them to sell that many units is fantastic, but for them to come up with a lighter, smaller version of this at maybe half the price point or even at $2,000 come September, I can guarantee you everyone will jump on that bandwagon because it's like walking to Costco, right? You see a $2,000 TV, you walk to the back, it's a $7 chicken. I'm going to buy that chicken for sure, right? It's the same. It's a very crude analogy, but I think in the same way, right? You market this amazing, spatial computing device for like 3,500 USD, and then 2 quarters later you release the lighter version of that at half the price. People are going to be excited for that. And I think where I'm getting with this is with all of the data that we can use in augmented reality and spatial computing, that is so much more data that we can personalize to an individual. Right. And I've always had this pipe dream back in my marketing days. Like, what if we could use like heads up displays in vehicles or augmented reality glasses? So as people are walking through, it's like if I'm walking by a pizza, right? It'll actually pop up on my augmented reality on my drive, like, hey, there's a $2 coupon if you make a 2-minute detour here and get a pizza. Cool, right? I'll drive over there. It's not intrusive. It's not messing with my driving. I can set the frequency of my ads or what kind of ads I want to get. And I think with Vision Pro, like people laugh at all these guys in the subway walking through the street, pinching everything and dropping markers. I was like, good for them for doing that because as a lot of these things get dropped, and they're the kind of first adopters, I think, that are carving this augmented reality world, right? By having the courage to go out, wear this ridiculous
yeah.
thing on your head in public, and for you not to be get hit by a bus, like, and for people to see this, it's like, man, this is really cool technology, right? And it's working. So I'm all for it, but I think it's just we need to be very specific, like what Apple's doing with what within AI are we trying to do? Is it spatial computing? Is it augmented reality? How do we bring these together and build this the right way? And I think they're on the right track in terms of how this should be. Otherwise, it's going to go completely off the rails, and a lot of the data sets we get, we're not going to know what to do with, and we're not going to know how to protect it. So, if there's no governance on infosec, then there's really no use case for any of that, in my opinion.
For sure, for sure. To me, Vision Pro is essentially Pokemon Go on steroids, right? Because Pokemon Go also had the same idea, right? I can't remember the name of the company who did that. I know it started with an N, but they. Oh yeah, there you go. So no, I.
Ingress was an invite only game, and that's what started Pokemon Go. And what you had to do was capture portals around the streets and around the areas. And my friends made tons of like friends in that community because of it. So they became a test case for like, let's do Pokemon Go and release it to
Oh
the
wow.
masses. Yeah, it's pretty cool how they started.
Because at the same time, it's a game, but yeah, at the same time, it's data collection for AR and VR, right? So you have all these guys who's shooting Pokemons here and there, going to places that's basically not reachable with Google Maps, and they're essentially data collecting, right? And all those data, it makes AR, VR, and VR and spatial computing even better, similar to what Apple is doing. So yeah, I completely agree, Dan, with all that you mentioned regarding AR VR for Vision Pro.
Yeah, for sure. I think we have a lot to talk about as we continue this discussion when we look at the use case of generative AI. We'll continue this discussion in the next week's episode as well. But again, Jasper, thank you for joining me on today's episode as well. And for all of you
My
out
pleasure.
there excited about AI technology, stay safe. But again, don't be scared either, and really try to understand the use cases and be open-minded about some of these new technologies that we're seeing in the marketplace. But again, safety is paramount for everyone. So hope everyone stays well this week, and looking forward to our next episode in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Jasper.
Thanks, man. Thanks to all our listeners.